It began on a morning that felt entirely unremarkable. You wouldn't find blaring sirens or flashing news banners, only a silent digital refresh on a solitary webpage. As dawn broke, the International Skating Union quietly hit publish on their revised roster for the 2026 World Figure Skating Championships held in Prague. Normally, this is just bureaucratic housekeeping, the sort of mundane paperwork adjustment that occurs constantly. A handful of trainers might skim it, alongside national committee members, and perhaps a scattering of hardcore enthusiasts. The masses remain blissfully oblivious. Yet, on this particular day, eagle-eyed observers caught a glaring omission. A prominent figure present yesterday had vanished into thin air. Alysa Liu, the current queen of the globe, the girl who wore the gold in Milan, was completely erased from the document. The United States figure skating body issued absolutely zero official statements. Her management camp stayed dark, and her social media feeds were echoing with total silence. All that remained was a modified ledger, revealing that exactly 3 females from the States would be flying to the Czech Republic: Amber Glenn, Isabel Levido, and backup skater Sarah Everhart, who had stepped up once Brady Tennell passed on the opportunity. Instantly, message boards exploded in absolute chaos, with frantic followers constantly reloading their browsers as digital snapshots multiplied across Twitter like wildfire, while frantic whispers flooded through deep Reddit rabbit holes and chaotic Discord channels. Hold on, are we being pranked? The initial wave of shock convinced everyone they were simply looking at a massive clerical error. Competitors pull out constantly, sure, but that usually triggers a choreographed media dance, medical reports, official letters, PR spins. Here, you could hear a pin drop. In a fiercely scrutinized arena like this, radio silence breeds sheer panic, because this wasn't just some random contender bowing out. She wore the heavy crown of the undisputed global victor. Just weeks prior, on the 19th of February beneath the bright lights of Milan, she had skated the masterpiece of her lifetime, capturing not 1, but 2 ultimate Olympic prizes. Truth be told, within barely 30 days, she transcended her status as a highly regarded athlete and transformed into an outright international phenomenon. That precise meteoric rise is exactly why her sudden ghosting felt so intensely bizarre. Crown holders are fundamentally wired to fiercely protect their thrones. When you conquer the Winter Games, you show your face at the subsequent global showdown. It is the unwritten, sacred heartbeat of the competitive calendar. Peak winter glory in the 2nd month of the year, followed by the ultimate global clash in the 3rd. Yet, completely out of nowhere, the Golden Girl pulled the plug. The entire world demanded answers. Panic-stricken supporters feared she had suffered a devastating physical blow. More pragmatic voices guessed that the sheer brutal grind of a championship year had left her running on empty. Meanwhile, a select group of veteran insiders murmured a completely different theory. They claimed they saw this coming from a mile away. Peel back the layers of her immediate post-victory life, and suddenly, her shocking retreat clicks perfectly into place. To unravel this mystery, we must hit the rewind button. We need to go back to that monumental night of victory. The second her skates left that frozen Italian stage, her reality didn't simply pause. It kicked into a terrifying, high-octane overdrive, and absolutely not in the glamorous fashion you might picture. For 20 grueling days following her ultimate triumph, her itinerary was an unrelenting beast. She was dragged across continents, thrown under harsh studio lights, pushed through endless flash photography sessions, and forced into a never-ending cycle of press junkets. Every single corner of the athletic universe demanded a slice of her newfound glory. Yet, buried deep within that chaotic hurricane, an entirely different narrative was unfolding. It was incredibly subtle. Hidden from the public eye lay a trail of extremely delicate breadcrumbs. Throwaway remarks during late-night talks, fleeting expressions that felt utterly benign in the moment, but with the sharp lens of hindsight, they strike a deeply profound chord. They were the very first whispers signaling that her ultimate career move wasn't going to take place within a frozen rink. It was destined to occur miles away from any spotlight. If you truly want to grasp the reality behind her vanishing act from that European roster, you are required to dissect the brutal reality of her previous 3 weeks. Her days mirrored absolutely nothing resembling the grueling boot camp required for a global title defense. Instead, her life morphed into a wildly different, much more colossal beast. Throw all of that onto the shoulders of a freshly crowned 20-year-old Golden Girl, and you have the perfect recipe for intense psychological burnout. However, the exact turning point that shattered every expectation never occurred near frozen water. The climax unfolded deep within a bustling terminal. The second she dropped a cryptic digital dispatch about the ordeal, the masses finally woke up to the fact that her sudden exit carried an incredibly profound, intensely intimate weight. By the way, if this deep dive has you hooked, sound off in the replies and let me know exactly which corner of the globe you are tuning in from tonight. Tracking the worldwide reach of these mysteries is my absolute favorite thing, especially since our next chapter kicks off mere hours after she touched down on home soil, and that subsequent, bone-crushing itinerary just might hold the ultimate key to this entire puzzle. Her departure from the Italian epicenter of athletic glory was surprisingly muted, almost hauntingly serene. There were no billionaire charter planes, zero screaming paparazzi swarms. She merely boarded a standard commercial Delta airliner bound straight for the Golden State. Eyewitnesses claimed that the cabin crew discreetly bumped her up to premium luxury the moment they connected her face to her monumental victory. Their reasoning was simple. They flat-out refused to let the ultimate queen of the ice squeeze into economy class. It was a fiercely touching, profoundly grounding gesture of humanity. For a handful of precious hours suspended in the sky, the frantic noise faded away. She finally caught her breath and drifted into deep slumber. Yet, upon hitting the tarmac in the Bay Area, her very first destination shocked absolutely everyone. Completely bypassing the flashing cameras and ignoring the high-profile broadcasting desks to slip into a humble local eatery, tucked away in a quiet neighborhood in Alama, where she casually dug into a plate of tiramisu, earnestly confessing to the chef that it was the most spectacular dessert she had ever let melt on her tongue. For a fleeting second, she appeared to be nothing more than a normal 20-year-old girl basking in a phenomenal triumph, sharing a simple dinner surrounded by her loved ones. She craved a handful of peaceful afternoons alongside her siblings, yet that tranquility shattered almost instantly once the sheer gravity of her Olympic victory took hold. The relentless fame engine roared to life, and before the week ended, Alysa Liu found her calendar packed so tightly that even seasoned sports veterans would suffer severe vertigo. Dawn broadcasts beckoned, midnight chat programs relentlessly pursued her, and the producers at the Today Show absolutely had to feature her face on their screens. Jimmy Fallon demanded her presence on his couch, while broadcast channels that traditionally ignored the ice rink were frantically begging for exclusive sit-downs. The heavyweights like CBS, NBC, ABC, and ESPN lined up like dominoes, followed swiftly by major publications, with Teen Vogue eagerly demanding she grace their front page. Rolling Stone booked an exclusive conversation in the heart of Manhattan, triggering a hurricane of flashing cameras, publicity circuits, speaking engagements, audio broadcasts, and in-person events. During the peak of this madness, she found herself tucked away inside an elite, private establishment in New York City, preparing for yet another editorial capture, where a high-end baker presented her with custom Lucky Charms treats because the production crew had thoroughly investigated her personal cravings. The gestures were undoubtedly sweet and highly complimentary, yet absolutely suffocating, thrusting Alysa Liu into the global spotlight for almost 20 consecutive days without a single pause. She bounced from one broadcast center to the following, waking up on the East Coast and sleeping on the West, enduring an endless barrage of interrogations, forced greetings, and camera flashes. Yet, if you carefully analyze that chaotic sequence of events, a deeply concerning contradiction slowly begins to reveal itself. Amidst this overwhelming media circus, she was officially slated to be rigorously training for the upcoming global title defense, which is exactly when this narrative takes a sharp, compelling twist. Preparing for a competition of that magnitude is absolutely not a minor task you can simply wedge between commercial breaks on morning television. An athlete fighting to retain a planetary crown requires intense, agonizing dedication, endless full-program rehearsals, grueling leap stabilization, and punishing physical fitness regimens. Victory demands infinite hours, freezing at the rink, not lounging in luxury suites, waiting inside backstage lounges at 30 Rockefeller Plaza, or sprinting through terminals to catch publicity flights. Industry experts within the icy arena started whispering about this alarming reality the second the Winter Games concluded, recognizing that her upcoming schedule was entirely unforgiving. The ultimate sporting event wrapped up on February 21st, leaving a fiercely narrow window of just 31 days before the global tournament kicked off in Prague on March 24th. That incredibly brief gap is traditionally consumed by relentless isolation, where top-tier competitors spend all 31 days sharpening their routines and repairing their exhausted bodies following the ultimate trial. The actual lived experience for the newly crowned champion, however, painted an entirely contrasting and chaotic picture. In the blink of an eye, she evolved from a mere competitor into a colossal cultural phenomenon, watching her digital audience multiply at a terrifying speed. Countless freshly obsessed admirers flooded her profiles within days, massive corporations begged for her endorsement, ruthless reporters hunted for her narrative, and without warning, the identical girl who once trained in absolute silence for her destiny found herself navigating an entirely alien and dazzling universe. It was a suffocating realm defined by blinding flashes, harsh studio bulbs, and itineraries that offered absolutely zero mercy. Thrown into this pressure cooker without any prior warning, the 20-year-old star found the crushing weight of public obsession to be deeply paralyzing. Yet, mere popularity cannot justify the sudden vanishing of her name from the official roster in Europe, as the genuine turning point arrived violently just a few nights later. This pivotal event did not unfold under studio lights or in front of high-fashion lenses. It occurred in a remarkably mundane setting, a simple transit terminal. The gravity of the incident that took place there was so profoundly disturbing that the skater felt utterly compelled to break her silence to the world. She dropped a singular, brief digital update, yet her vocabulary was razor-sharp, leaving her followers with a chilling sensation that the atmosphere had drastically darkened. The vibrant joy had been completely replaced by palpable dread in a midnight dispatch devoid of official publicists or press scrums, just a raw, fleeting social media post. She had recently touched down on the tarmac following yet another exhausting leg of her endless journey. It was likely the conclusion of one more interrogation, another forced smile, or another waypoint on a publicity carousel that flatly refused to stop spinning. Her typed confession was brief, yet it violently ripped the glamorous facade off the narrative, detailing how, upon walking into the arrival hall, a massive mob was already barricading the doors, armed with recording devices and begging for signatures while aggressively attempting to invade her personal space. That initial chaos was entirely expected, as golden victors naturally draw a frenzy, but her subsequent revelation sent shivers down the spine. She confessed that an unknown individual had stalked her, not merely strolling in the same direction, but relentlessly tracking her path until she reached her vehicle, using terribly stark language. A stranger actively hunted her down in the parking lot, prompting her to attach a deeply vulnerable plea rather than an angry accusation. She begged them to stop hunting her, leaving it at that: no theatrical breakdowns, no paragraphs of sorrow, just a hushed warning that an invisible boundary had been dangerously shattered. That exact heartbeat was when the terrifying reality of her explosive popularity truly dawned on her supporters, shattering the illusion that digital metrics were harmless. 7 million watchers quickly turning into 8 million invisible eyes. While those figures merely exist as pixels on a glowing display, the visceral terror of an unrecognizable figure sprinting behind you in a desolate transit lot is entirely another beast. That presents a tangible, intimately threatening danger, which is utterly devastating for an individual whose entire existence relies on perfectly choreographed and heavily monitored routines. Experiencing such unhinged, chaotic reality outside the rink possesses the power to mentally break someone, particularly when you dig into the darker chapters of her past and recall that she had previously fled from the competitive ice once before. At merely 16 years old, she walked away from the professional arena entirely, delivering a sudden resignation that left the entire athletic community absolutely paralyzed with shock. She confessed that the ice had slowly mutated from a sanctuary into a crushing weight. Speaking openly to the press, she painted a bleak picture of surrendering the reins of her existence, watching her daily routine, her personal choices, and even her own reflection slip entirely out of her grasp. Absolutely horrible, that was the exact phrase she used to describe her crumbling psychological state, a breaking point that drove her to abandon the grueling competitive arena for 2 full years. Yet, when she finally orchestrated her grand return in 2024, she demanded an uncompromising ultimatum: absolute autonomy. She resurrected her shattered career through her own uncompromising lens, dictating every single rhythm, every grueling practice hour, and every soul allowed into her inner circle. Those lurking in her inner circle whispered about her fierce vow to never let the rink morph back into a prison. The second the pressure threatened to suffocate her again, she promised to simply walk away. She broadcasted this boundary to the world without hesitation, and for a fleeting, magical season, that fiercely protected mindset operated flawlessly. Gliding across the frozen stage with liberated brilliance and an untroubled spirit, she suddenly achieved the extraordinary, capturing the ultimate prize of an Olympic gold medal. Make that a pair of golds. reigning supreme at the absolute pinnacle of her athletic universe. Though such monumental triumphs carry a dark underbelly, they breed a monstrous, unyielding obsession from the masses. In a heartbeat, the very woman who had meticulously crafted a quiet, harmonious existence found herself thrown naked into the blinding, unforgiving glare of the entire world. Endless interrogations from the press, chaotic promotional circuses, screaming fans swarming terminal gates, and an audience of millions dissecting her every single breath. Amidst that suffocating tornado of newfound fame, a massive, unresolved shadow loomed silently above her. The fate of the upcoming World Championships. Was Prague still on the horizon? During one particularly intense press exchange, Alysa finally tackled the burning mystery, dropping a profoundly fascinating hint. She acknowledged the looming late March tournament but confessed that the ultimate verdict on lacing up her skates remained completely up in the air. While expressing a genuine desire to battle for the world title, she deliberately dropped breadcrumbs about a rival obligation lying in wait just weeks later in April. The legendary Stars on Ice spectacle, a sweeping theatrical voyage where Olympic heroes captivate audiences in arenas scattered across the entire country. Replaying that audio clip today reveals a strikingly contemplative energy. There was no arrogance, no brush-off, only a deeply introspective human, desperately wrestling to map out the chaotic trajectory of her upcoming 6 weeks. Juggling relentless conditioning, television spotlights, red carpets, endless flights, and brutal ice drills meant an inevitable breaking point was approaching, forcing a single choice that would shatter the suspense. Yet this pivotal crossroads was far from an impulsive strike. If you peel back the layers of the past, the breadcrumbs of her departure were glaringly obvious. Subtle whispers, almost invisible tremors in her behavior that completely bypassed the radar of the oblivious public eye. These tiny echoes revealed that Alysa was simply honoring the sacred pact she had forged with her own soul, bowing to the boundaries of her own mind and body. By the terrifying moment Alysa delivered her final verdict on Prague, the breathless public was still gasping to match her meteoric pace, blinded by an illusion of absolute perfection. Armed with dual golden crowns from the Winter Games, a digital empire of millions, and lucrative corporate titans knocking down her door, flooded with daily broadcast summons, she appeared to be an invincible force of nature, yet the brutal arithmetic of professional sports whispered a far more treacherous truth. Figure skating circuits are merciless carnivores that offer utterly zero oxygen to the weary. The second the Olympic flame extinguishes in February, the global title hunt attacks just weeks later, creating one of the most viciously compressed pivot windows in any athletic realm. To survive that 4-week gauntlet, mortals must surrender themselves to singular devotion, ruthless physical healing, and terrifyingly intense rehearsal. Zero flights, zero cameras, just pure isolation on the rink, where the marathon-free program demands bleeding-edge precision and every single aerial leap must remain flawlessly dialed in. Cardiovascular reserves must be violently resurrected from the devastating emotional and physical wreckage of the Winter Games, and precisely here, Alysa's trajectory twisted into uncharted territory. Because the preceding 3 weeks of her reality bore absolutely zero resemblance to the grueling monastic grind required for a world title defense. Instead, her daily ledger mirrored the dizzying, chaotic whirlwind of an A-list superstar. Bouncing between glamorous flashbulbs, high-profile studio sets, and cross-country press junkets, elite skating veterans began murmuring a revelation that struck like lightning once it escaped their lips. Prague was arguably never the actual endgame, not due to a lack of firepower, but because the merciless hands of the clock made it a physical impossibility. The majestic closing ceremonies wrapped on the 21st of February, while European practice ice opened around the 22nd of March, leaving a suffocating 31-day vacuum. That microscopic sliver of time was her only lifeline. Yet within those 31 days, Alysa had devoured a monumental workload that takes veteran champions a full calendar year to conquer. She had allowed herself to be swallowed whole by the blinding, industrial gears of international stardom. A sharp-eyed broadcast critic noted online that the second the gold touched her neck, the world critically underestimated the violent overnight explosion of her celebrity. In a matter of weeks, her digital kingdom swelled into an empire of millions, unlocking mountains of terrifyingly vast wealth and unprecedented corporate empires. Heavyweight sponsorships, lucrative ink on contracts, and primetime features lightning strike phenomena that a mortal competitor might only glimpse once in a lifetime. For a 20-year-old warrior who had previously bled on the ice for virtually zero financial reward, passing up these monumental paydays was utterly unthinkable. They were vital for her real-world survival, yes, but more brutally, they were exploding in the immediate present, a golden gateway that the entire industry knew could slam shut at any given second. Yet painting this purely as a cash grab or a vanity project strips the narrative of its true soul. If greed or glory were the only drivers, the aura surrounding her retreat would radiate an entirely different energy. Rather than a calculated surrender to fortune, the quiet guardians of the ice rink frame her stunning withdrawal from the global stage through a vastly more profound lens. An unwavering, ironclad consistency to her own promises. It echoes relentlessly, like a mantra. Ever since her breathtaking return to the ice in 2024, Liu has drawn an absolute line in the sand regarding a single, unbreakable rule. Her inner voice dictates everything. Whenever the physical grind threatens to break her, she immediately retreats. Should her calendar grow suffocating, she ruthlessly rips it apart. She once threw out a laughing warning. Should anyone dare to micromanage even the tiniest detail of her existence, whether it be the way she pinned her hair or the private path she walked, she would vanish into thin air without a second thought. While peers might dismiss such words as mere locker room banter, for Alysa Liu, that fierce independence forged the absolute bedrock of her legendary resurrection on the ice. She resurrected her passion by weaving it tightly with harmony, kindred spirits, blood ties, and utter liberation. Consequently, when striking Olympic gold violently summoned the suffocating spotlight that previously shattered her spirit, a primal defense mechanism deep within her awoke not with a chaotic explosion, nor a theatrical press conference, but through a silent, ironclad resolve. The moment that hidden verdict was struck, the ensuing dominoes tumbled with chilling inevitability. Like a ghost, her moniker vanished from the competitor roster. Sarah Everhart was instantly thrust onto the national squad bound for Prague, while Amber Glenn and Isabeau Levito braced themselves to carry the star-spangled banner, condemning the grandest global tournament to proceed devoid of its ultimate conquering queen. Yet, herein lies the truly mesmerizing twist of this entire saga. Deep within the icy veins of the figure skating realm, scarcely a single soul views Alysa Liu's phantom vanishing act as an impending catastrophe. Quite the contrary, insiders hail it as the ultimate proof that her triumphant rebirth is unfolding flawlessly, considering the shattered teenager who fled at 16 felt entirely stripped of her agency. Conversely, the fierce competitor stepping away from the global stage at 20 exudes an aura of supreme dominion, a monumental shift destined to etch the upcoming era of her legacy in stone. Thus, the looming question remains, what follows this silence? In 3 short weeks, the paramount global showdown in Prague shall ignite precisely on schedule, unfazed by her ghost. Grandstands will swell with breathless multitudes. Sweeping symphonies will flood the freezing air. Adjudicators will assume their rigid formations against the glacial barriers, and a fresh sovereign of the ice shall ascend the throne. Yet, that heavy crown will never touch Alysa Liu. Consequently, the star-spangled delegation carries a distinctly altered aura this season. Amber Glenn descends upon the battlefield wielding the fiercest veteran edge among her compatriots. She spectacularly concluded her Olympic odyssey by unleashing a volcanic rally, clawing her way fiercely out of 13th to seize a magnificent 5th-place triumph. Such indomitable grit historically transforms into pure lethal weaponry amidst the blinding pressure of a global championship. Isabeau Levito shall likewise grace the frozen stage, hauling the towering prestige she painstakingly carved over recent campaigns, recognized universally as an absolute master of spellbinding technical grace. Meanwhile, the final patriotic slot has dramatically fallen to Sarah Everhart, the standby warrior who was abruptly catapulted into a career-defining crucible she never saw coming. For Everhart, answering that fateful ring must have plunged her straight into an absolute fever dream. One fleeting second you are quietly maintaining your edge in the shadows. The very next, you are violently hurled onto the planet's grandest ice. The cruelty and magic of this discipline pivot in a heartbeat. Simultaneously, the fierce struggle for absolute planetary supremacy radically contorts with the reigning empress abandoning the battlefield. Hordes of pundits have already crowned Japan's Kaori Sakamoto as the terrifying, unstoppable juggernaut destined to conquer Prague. Her relentless precision and explosive momentum have forged her into an unbreakable force over modern campaigns. A fiercely hungry vanguard of emerging prodigies hailing from both Japan and South Korea will inevitably storm the barricades, hungering for absolute glory. To put it simply, the bloodbath on the frozen arena will remain as savage and heart-stopping as ever. Yet the overarching mythology shadowing the clash will breathe a vastly distinct atmosphere, heavily haunted by a supreme queen observing from an unseen sanctuary. This monumental void forces devoted disciples of the ice to confront a profoundly captivating mystery. How does a soul as fiercely unique as Alysa Liu truly define triumph? For literal generations, this cutthroat discipline quantified greatness through an utterly ruthless metric: gleaming hardware, historic banners, and shattered scoreboards. History relentlessly glorified those agonizing martyrs who subjected their bodies to unending carnage, surviving tournament after tournament. Yet, Liu's explosive saga already ripped that archaic blueprint to shreds once before. Upon her abrupt exit at merely 16 years of age, the masses mourned the tragic finale of her spectacular narrative. In brilliant defiance, it merely ignited a profoundly unprecedented origin story. She stormed back 2 years later, wielding absolute sovereignty over her destiny, meticulously forging a joyous new bond with the frozen arena. Then, soaring on those very terms, she aggressively scaled the ultimate pinnacle of human athletic achievement, capturing the immortal Olympic gold. Now, a mere handful of weeks post-triumph, she has orchestrated yet another seismic pivot that could easily bewilder the untrained eye. Forsaking a global battleground whilst gripping the reigning crown seems like absolute madness. However, peer closely into the turbulent tapestry of her journey, and the underlying genius gleams like a diamond. She refuses to be a rabid hound hunting down every available accolade. Instead, she is fiercely guarding the sacred, balanced existence she painstakingly resurrected from the ashes of her initial burnout. That perfect equilibrium, that unyielding independence, that absolute certainty that she commands the ice, refusing to let the ice consume her soul. Viewed through this empowering lens, her phantom departure from the Prague battlefield is far from a tragic retreat. In truth, it stands as the most explosive, undeniable vindication of the very manifesto that summoned her back to the freezing rinks. For the fractured shadow of Alysa Liu, who once suffocated beneath the sport's crushing weight, would have likely bitten her tongue and marched numbly towards self-destruction. The formidable titan breathing today seized a radically divergent fate. She tuned into her spirit, forcefully hit the brakes, and boldly carved out an entirely new trajectory. The universe will likely have to agonizingly endure countless moons before witnessing her majesty again, anticipating the fresh, competitive dawn arriving deep into 2026. It promises drastically reinvented choreography, wildly ambitious new horizons, and perhaps the thunderous opening strides toward conquering yet another mythic Olympic crusade. Should that scenario unfold, we might ultimately view this springtime departure not as surrendering the battlefield, but rather taking a vital breath before an epic sequel. Truthfully, a competitor's heaviest choices are never scored by panels under blinding arena lights. They are forged in solitary silence, miles away from the frozen rink. Now, I turn the question over to you. Placed exactly in Alysa Liu's shoes, would you choose personal peace and step away, or fly straight to Prague to fiercely protect your crown? Drop your verdict down below. Moreover, if you crave narratives that pierce straight through the superficial veil of mainstream athletic news, simply hit that subscribe button. Ultimately, within this frozen arena, much like human existence itself, the most captivating sagas invariably unfold far beyond the blinding glare of public attention.